The third type of binary compound that we're going to name are called type 3 binary compounds. And those are compounds that contain two nonmetals. Right, so we're not going to have something with a positive and negative charge because we have two nonmetals. So we don't have a cation and an anion. We have two nonmetals that are sharing electrons to get together. Right, and so again, when we're naming these binary compounds, the first thing we want to do is look at the first element and determine if it's a metal or not a metal, and that will lead us to the next step of the process. Right, and so if we look at this compound SO2, we're going to say, well, is this first element a metal or not a metal? And it's sulfur, so it's over here in the non-metal. So we know we don't have a type 1 or type 2. We have a type 3 compound because we have oxygen and sulfur, which are both not metals. And since there's no charges to balance, what we have to do is name them by saying how many of each thing is in there, right? And so we use these suffixes that you'll have your chart that tells you what they are, so you don't have to memorize them. You just have to look at it and figure it out. Right, and these suffixes will tell us how many of each thing we have. And hopefully for our examples, we only go up that far. Now we keep going. So let's put them all out. Hepta, octa, and how far do we want to go? All right, all the way to deca, nona, and deca. Right, and so mono means 1, di means 2, tri 3, tetra 4, penta 5, etc. Right, and so if the first element is just 1, we don't put the word mono. Right, so we would have sulfur, and then whoever comes next, there's 2 oxygens, so we need di, and then oxygen becomes oxide, so sulfur dioxide. Right, so with the guy who comes second, we change his name to the ID ending, just like we did with the anions in binary type 1 and type 2 compounds. Right, so then if we had a name like sulfur trioxide and wanted to write the formula, we would know that the first element is sulfur, and tri tells us we have 3 an oxide or oxygen, so SO3. Right, and so that's how you go both ways, from a formula to a name and a name to a formula with type 3 binary compounds. These are the easiest ones to name, right, because you're just counting how many things are there. So remember, 2 non-metals. So once you determine that the first element in the binary compound is not a metal, then you know you have a type 3 compound. Right, so nitrogen is over here, it's not a metal. Oxygen is not a metal, so we have a type 3 binary compound. Now our first element isn't by itself, there's 2 of them, so we have to do our abbreviations. So then we have dinitrogen, nitrogen, and we have 4 oxygens, so tetroxide. And we kind of dropped the A, so we just call it tetroxide instead of tetraoxide. Let's try a couple more. All right, say we have a boron trichloride. All right, so we have 2 nonmetals, so this just tells us how many, right? There's no prefix here, so we know there's 1, so we put boron. Tri means we have 3, so we have 3 chlorine, BlCl3. So we're just counting how many things there are and putting them together. Right, so say we have a P4O10. Right, we look at our periodic table, phosphorus and oxygen are both over here, so they're not metals. This tells us we have 4 phosphorus, so we have tetra phosphorus, phosphorus, and then we have 10 oxygens, so we need deca, decoxide, And so type 3 binary compounds are pretty straightforward. You'll be given, these prefixes, so you don't have to memorize those. All you have to do is recognize that the first element in the binary compound is not one of the metals. It's a non-metal and it's connected to a non-metal.